All right, hello everyone. So thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for the quick introduction. My name is Marcel Harmann. I'm the founder and CEO of THORWallet, but also a board member of the Crypto Valley Association. And yes, I do believe that this topic actually does not have enough time to be discussed in 30 minutes, so 5 minutes extra is actually great. The topic we have today is decentralization and what real decentralization looks like and how it can be achieved. And we can look at that from various angles. And to start with, I would give every one of you 1 or 2 minutes to explain who you are. We have 4 excellent experts here representing a Layer 1 blockchain. So maybe quickly, who are you, what do you do, and who do you represent today?
I'll go first. Hi everyone, my name is Konrad. I work with Near Foundation as the head of BD and blockchain success. So Near Foundation is the Layer 1 blockchain building now the open web tech stack and some AI/Web3 solutions. And the decentralization topic is very near to our hearts at Near Foundation because blockchain is all about decentralizing the use of the internet and the power that this can generate to our society.
I'm Jan Camenisch, CTO at the DFINITY Foundation. I've been in crypto since like '93, first like doing eCash and distributed systems, cryptographic algorithms, and since 6 years at the DFINITY Foundation, now CTO, leading all the development, I guess also some product stuff as well. And yeah, I guess interesting to see about decentralization, where I guess at the foundation we have taken maybe a different approach from many others. I'm happy to discuss like why we made some of those decisions, and maybe time is not enough for all of them, but let's see where we get.
Absolutely.
Hey everybody, my name is Fred. I'm the CEO of the Cardano Foundation. And we've been since 2015-16 really working at scalability, interoperability, and governance. And really thinking about how do we create a better world, a more social just ecosystem where everybody has a voice, and the next generation of financial operating system.
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm president of the Solana Foundation. Solana and Layer 1 blockchain. We just talked about Solana, so.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So I have prepared a bunch of questions because I'm actually really interested in what you have to say. The first question I would actually like to address to everyone. How do you and your organization define decentralization, and do you have certain action steps to achieve that? Whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to go first. So way back in 2017, when we were building Earn.com, formerly 21, we wrote a paper called Quantifying Decentralization and looked at decentralization on numerous dimensions, right? And then kind of proposed the idea of the Nakamoto coefficient, which would be a blended sort of basket of the various decentralization elements. And so that was things like number of clients, certainly a number of validators and distribution of validators, token distribution. I forget some of the others. The one that people typically will reference is node concentration. And I think certainly developer ecosystem concentration is something that is also extremely relevant because that is the long-term kind of health, and that's really the population of your ecosystem over the long term, and those are the people who are going to help actually build applications and build your city over the longer term. So when we think about decentralization, I often think back to that paper that we wrote, and I think that it's not just node concentration, although that is of course important for network health. It's also the number of clients you have, your developer concentration, your token holder concentration, and I think those are some of the top elements. So you could take that as a framework and go through each of those, and you could even, if you really wanted to be structured about it, plot it out and set KPIs.
Yeah, in Cardano, we sort of pride ourselves about decentralization is at the heart. But I have to say decentralization is also a trade-off because it's actually really hard to have maximum decentralization and still be moving forward because there comes a coordination problem into it. So we tend to be looking at it into 5 different elements. One of the elements is the hardware stack. So when you look at the hardware and you look at the, the cloud-based servers and the bare metal and so on, do you have a concentration on the hardware? So in other words, if everything is in one data center and you pull the plug to that data center, does it still work? Then there's a part which is the software. So how is the software actually compiled? Who actually runs the software and so on. Then we have the consensus. And I think consensus is one of the things which, both in terms of the Nakamoto coefficient, but also in terms of the Gini coefficient, Cardano scores extremely high. But there's a trade-off here, right? Because if you score really, really high on all of those, on the first 3 parameters, for instance, the transactions per second goes down. And that means that you need to have a really good data management layer to ensure that you can actually do meaningful enterprise application or payment rails, as Lily was speaking about, while still being maximum decentralized and being able to protect the network from certain types of attacks. Then on top of that comes then governance, of course, because governance, depending on how you look at it, is there an opportunity for a whale or somebody big to buy all your tokens and they can sway the governance, right? Which is a tech factor which is very dominant on Cardano, because we actually have this opportunity, right? And we're moving into the Chang hard fork, where other protocols, they more have, very centralized. We sit in Zook, we take the decisions, so you have to kind of sway us, right? So in this journey, there's a lot of trade-offs you have to do. So we try and do that over those 5 topics, and we really say, maximum decentralization is not necessarily the goal, but it's to have this really good trade-off being so decentralized that you can secure the network, you can ensure participation, but you can also ensure that there is a self-governance, that there's no one leader or one person or set of persons who is needed in the future to keep bringing the product to a product-to-market fit. It's about leaving a legacy who is self-evolving while still having control over all of these aspects of the decentralization.
Right, so yes, I agree with some of the layers and all of that, right? But at the end of the day, or maybe at the beginning of the day, you should ask yourself, like, why decentralization, right? I mean, I've seen sort of the cyberpunks kind of, if you read Cy.Crypt, the early 90s and so on, right? The decentralization was like a means to an end, in the sense that we want to have like free money, we want to have Bitcoin, right? No governance control. And it was sort of like this grassroots thing, like everybody can participate. And there's the other view that I think now the industry has moved towards, which is we want to have a secure network, right? So the decentralization is a means to achieve security to a large extent, right? And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, so how much decentralization do I have in order to achieve security? So it means I don't want to have like a central point of failure, because if I have a central point of failure, that point can attack. So I want to decentralize just like that. Now, of course, if you have like Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin was initially very decentralized, and they built in this like decentralization system inside the protocol, which was like genius, right? Because like coming from more the scientific aspect, you would build a decentralized system. Okay, let's have 20 parties. They do that, high secure data center, perfectly secure as well. It works, right? But people didn't invest in that. So Bitcoin came along and say, well, okay, everybody should participate, right? And it worked until now. Now we have just a few mining pools, so it's not really decentralized anymore, right? And so I guess the lesson here is, if you build your protocol with like a certain decentralization model in mind, you might be, it might be very difficult later on. So that's why these different layers are very important. You have to think about every layer. How do I decentralize there? And what's the point, right? So the inner computer runs like on dedicated hardware. So it's like server-grade hardware in like KYC data center. Actually, so it's known who runs which node in which subnet. That now allows you to do some of those trade-offs that you've spoken about. Now you don't have to have like 100,000 servers, 100,000 machines running your protocol, which again would be very slow because they all have to communicate, very expensive because you have to pay for them. So if you want to have like a performant blockchain that is cheap as well, you have to make sure that you know who the parties are that run your node, your software, So that's the lowest layer, right? And then, of course, you can move yourself up the stack until the governance, where we get more in like the tokenized system, where say, okay, so like here we need decentralization again. We want to have like different voting power. And I think if you look in the real world, and I think a lot of religious thing in blockchain, maybe you don't look too much at the real world. Living in Switzerland, like Switzerland is a federated government, right? And so also here, you know, like you make decisions, but you delegate some decisions, and the same in the blockchain world, right? I think that's the model that you should take for, and so that's why also like on the internet computer, there's like a governance system that's decoupled from everything else, right? Like in Bitcoin, the governance was part of the consensus algorithm. It was all intertwined, again, making the system not efficient, not fast. You're stuck with some decentralization model that you can, you know, it's not effective. And so that's why like in the internet computer protocol, for every level, we have really thought about what level of decentralization is necessary. You can have, then of course it's a matter of security as well, right? So then you can say for certain tasks, I want to have like 100 nodes. For other tasks, like 13 is good enough because that's like a game. I don't need high security for a game. Also here, it's a cost versus decentralization trade-off. And so we've like, when designing the protocol, we have like made like very conscious choices at every level just to, you know, like meet the goals, the design goals of decentralization.
Yeah. So I think all of that plus NEAR is really a religion of decentralization, and how we manifest this religion is by the design of our ecosystem. So of course, we as many other blockchains are decentralized by the way our tech runs. But what is, I believe, unique at NEAR is how we make our decisions and also how we fund our ecosystem. So to give you a couple of examples, since the beginning of the NEAR blockchain project, we said that the foundation is a temporary entity that we're going to dissolve when our ecosystem becomes self-sustainable. And now, along this journey, we started to spin off different parts of the foundation and different parts of our tech organization called Pagoda. So we have decided to scale up our BD operation by setting up the hubs across different continents that are independent teams that are running the BD operations, finding the new use cases, and investing in different startups that want to build on NEAR. On top of it, the way we started to fund our ecosystem, we have set up a DAO called NDC, NEAR Digital Collective, which has a voting process to nominate the members who will decide on behalf of the community which project to fund. Another great example that we have started is the Padlock, which is our retroactive funding mechanism for the public goods. So it's really, really within our mindset and within our philosophy to drive this decentralization by not having one entity that makes decisions, but not having one entity that funds the projects, but not having one single entity that is thinking about the future of NEAR. So we really want this technology to get the organic adoption, and we have been super successful in the past few years that we're seeing like people coming to us at different conferences that, oh, I'm building on NEAR without any grant because I love your tech. So I think we're slowly getting there.
Nice. Thank you very much, everyone. So what I wanted to do is to give the audience kind of a basis, a foundation to see the vision of the individual protocols, where they see what is decentralization and how to achieve that. So everyone had a chance to answer that. I have a bunch of more questions where we can dive into like ecosystems, examples of decentralization, governance, and feel free, everyone who thinks this question is you'd like to answer, just go on and pick it and we can kick off also a discussion. A first one I have prepared is, and some of you have already mentioned it, the governance structure, like the need, you have a foundation set up, you would like to dissolve it, some are, you have this counterpart between you want to decentralize, but at the same time, you do need to have some sort of governance oversight because you need to let it grow, right? And to to be successful in growing, at some point you start at the centralized point. But then at some point you can evolve it into full decentralization maybe. How do you balance that you grow from a centralized point to full decentralization with government's oversight? Do you have certain aspects, some rules written in your statutes, or how do you achieve that? Who would like to take that question?
I mean, I can go first because we are a little bit different than many other blockchain foundations. So even though we're one of the first blockchain foundations after the Ethereum Foundation in Switzerland, what's quite difficult, or what's different with the Cardano Foundation, is that we did not do any ICO. We did not do. We don't control the monetary policy, and we don't have sort of magical Genesis keys where we can just print more money or change the protocol. We don't fund a development arm, so we're not saying, dear developers, this is what we want, and there's an SLA between. And that also means that we don't control an on-chain treasury, so we're not just sitting some people in a boardroom and saying, I like that project better than this project. However, when we were founded back then, there was sort of, the idea was that, after 5 years, we will have a flourishing decentralized network, and the Cardano Foundation should be sort of, redundant, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when the rubber hits the road and you sort of start seeing, these things take time, and you're basically challenging the fabric of society of 200 years of development in legal and regulatory spaces, the idea about can you control your own identity, and what does it mean to be in charge of your own identity. And then the second part is, there's a difference also here on this panel, right, between what you can think about as a permission blockchain and a permissionless blockchain. So there's something about, what do you stand for and what do you accept in terms of who can actually participate in your blockchain, which is kind of interesting. So what we do in the Cardano Foundation is we're quite clearly saying we're taking the 20-year fight. When I say the 20-year fight, it means that we want to ensure that Cardano, the public blockchain, is available for everybody around the world to get economic opportunities, to participate, to contribute, and it's there also in 20 years, and it will still be pumping and not missing a block, and you don't have to restart it, or you don't have to go down a wrong fork in any way, in a decentralized, distributed manner. And that is quite hard. On top of that, we decided to do on-chain governance, which is even worse. There's some very famous blockchains who said, no, we're not touching that. When technology is hard enough, but when you deal with people, that's even harder, right? So we basically created, an on-chain government where you have so-called delegated representatives, which is politicians online who can suggest, protocol parameters, change in block size, changes in the protocol. There is a sort of a constitutional committee with a constitution being formed, which is sort of the judge and the guardrails, whether this is the intent of Cardano or not. And then there's the stake pool operators who actually run it, who has sort of the right of refusal, right? And that makes things quite complicated, and it also slows you down, but it also ensures that everybody has a place on Cardano. And that means that today you can take out the original entities around Cardano, you can basically wipe them from the earth, and Cardano will still be running, and it has still been running for over 3,000 days with not missing one single block, and it will continue to keep running even though all those entities are not there. So for us, it's not so much about when do we close down the foundation, it's more about how do we get regulatory certainty that wherever you are in the world, you can believe in blockchain, third-generation blockchains, you can get economic opportunities wherever you are, and even in places who is very centralized in the governance, that they start seeing that there's new ways of leading a nation state, or new ways of generating economic value in places where there aren't any today, due to whatever history. And there, I think, blockchains can be an inspiring beacon for those people that there is other ways to do it.
Hmm. Does anyone else want to chip in on here?
Well, I guess you mentioned on-chain governance, right? Which, again, going about security, the internet computer started with on-chain governance end-to-end, right? So it's although the DFINITY Foundation, and I think that's where we still are not very centralized, the DFINITY Foundation is the one that writes most of the code, but whenever there's a code upgrade, a new version of the code, then that code gets proposed to the governance system, like a DAO, token holders are staking there, right, and it gives them voting rights, and then they can then decide whether to adopt or not that new code, and all the rest is automatic, right? I mean, so it's quite a unique system. It's also, of course, important if you want to be on the one hand, you're fully decentralized there. On the other hand, actually, it allows you, because it's all part of the protocol, it actually allows you to still like very fast upgrade that, right? You don't need any Telegram channels where people have to organize themselves. Okay, so now let's install the new software. It's all automatic, right? So I think that there, the Internet Computer has achieved the ultimate goal. Of course, now when we talk about being around for the next 300 years, things change, right? New hardware comes, new protocols need to be adopted. And I think that, to me, is actually the most challenging part of decentralization, right? Because it's cryptography, it's complex protocols, and so forth. It's like if we ask people to build a new atomic power plant in a decentralized way, it's very difficult to do, right? I think that we're working on that as well, right? So that when the foundation or other parties hopefully will contribute new code, then also you need to have other people actually who review that code, make sure actually that code doesn't do any bad, at least review the differences. And of course, that not everybody can do, right? So then you need to have like some experts that maybe chime in. And so they're like on the Internet Computers, it's kind of like named neurons kind of concept. So people can say, well, okay, I'm an expert in this. They can review the code, and then they can say, well, okay, so now I voted, I looked at the code, and then other people can say, well, okay, we follow those guys. It's like a fluid democracy kind of thing. But okay, so for the topic of code upgrade, I follow that expert, right? And so like in the real world, again, right? You have like a liquid democracy where you have parties, or you try to inform yourself. You ask now maybe for an atomic power plant some physicists. You try to inform yourself, and so we've built the very same thing on the Internet Computer as well.
I think we can agree that there are definitely many ways, many roads that lead to Rome. We do have the same vision. We want decentralization. That's why we are here. Many ways to achieve it, and in the end, we'll see along the way. Something works better, some works a bit less. I'm a builder myself. Something that I've noticed that might have not too much attention. How do the ecosystem you have and you foster, each one of you, how do you make sure that the projects that are built have also decentralization in mind? Because we have seen instances where I'm thinking about why this is important. We see rug pulls, we see people going to jail because it's too centralized. In the end, we need to make sure that the user who uses it can be sure that this technology is really decentralized, also the projects. How do you make sure your ecosystem projects are decentralized?
If I may start here, so on the Internet Computer, there's like something we call service nervous system for like dApps on the Internet Computer. So if you're like a developer, you've built your dApp on the protocol, right? Like OpenChat is an example, like a chat application. It was originally developed by 3 developers, right? And then at some point they said, okay, so now we want to become decentralized. We also want to have this blockchain security, right? And so now they then submitted a proposal to the governance system, hey, we want to decentralize as well. And then the network created a token for these guys, right? And then they gave control over all their smart contracts to this DAO, right? And then the people were like participating. They bought they swapped the ICP against these tokens. And so now actually that application, that dApp, is now like an on-chain end-to-end governance protocol as well. So now the token holders of that chat application, they can now vote on updates or not. So technically, it's a DAO. It cannot be rock.
So there is no legal structure. I'm interested also in terms of is there a legal structure? Yes or no? Do you suggest that to your ecosystem projects, basically? Then should the tech be different from the front ends? Should a different team run the front ends, or should the front end run anyhow on IPFS or be fully decentralized? How far do you want to segregate the decentralization part so there is no center of attack?
I can maybe chime in here. So speaking about how we build the tech. And I think building the tech in a decentralized manner is super difficult, as we all have experienced working in this industry. But what we managed to do at Near Foundation is that successfully we started to see what parts of our tech stack can be decentralized from the core. So to give you a couple of examples, we started our tech company called Pagoda, which was supposed to build the whole protocol. But then we figure out, okay, so we have so many tech stack that we have built, we can spin out the protocol layer, which is the basic infra layer of our blockchain, as a separate entity. So this entity we separate and it's called Near One. Then we looked within our tech company, okay, we have this amazing DevRel guys. We don't need them to run as part of this big entity. So we spun out that they started a startup called DevHub that is providing hackathon services and DevRel solutions for our ecosystem. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, we spun out another startup from within our tech company Pagoda called Nafl Labs, which has started to offer data availability solutions to layer 2s on Ethereum, right? And on Near blockchain, and they're going to compete with Celestia now. So our approach is to incubate the ideas, see if they have traction, and then spin them out through external capital, through VC fundraising, or through our, initial financial support and make them self-sustainable. And we have noticed that this is one of the strategies that we try to do as a decentralization objective that we want to achieve. But also we have a lot of inbound and organic growth because we have a very charismatic leader, Ilya Polosukin, who have this cult aura around him, and all the developers around the world want to build something with Near, right? So for us, it's pretty easy because it's really embedded in our culture and philosophy.
Maybe if just quickly. So I guess you ask about front end, back ends, and so on, right? I mean, obviously you cannot be decentralized if you have not all of that implemented by smart contracts, right? So if you have something on Amazon, it cannot be decentralized because somebody has the credit card information. So I think unless you can really implement your whole application by smart contracts, you can never be decentralized, right? You can run part on a protocol, it's not decentralized. So that's really the one thing that is important here, and that we should realize without everything on smart contracts, it cannot be decentralized in the first place.
I think there's something with the eye of the beholder, right? So what most people don't understand is that if you have a token project or dApp or whatever that might be who lies on top of a blockchain, you can't see that in isolation. So you can't go to a regulator and say, hey, I'm decentralized because I have developed this awesome smart contract, and that stands in isolation. It's just a piece of software code, and that's it. So whatever lies on top of a blockchain has connectivity to the underlying tech stack. And the regulator is now getting so clever, and we've been really working with many regulators around the world because they ask the right questions, that they're starting to look at the connectivity tissue among that. That means that a part of what you have to choose as a developer, depending on if you want to be a maximum decentralized DAO compared to being, a somewhere centralized, gaming protocol, or you want to do something in your local community for telco, you also have to look at the underlying infrastructure, because whether you want it or not, if you become successful, you deal with society, and society has rules and regulations, and the more successful you come, the more of these rules and regulations will apply to you, whether you start having employees or you start paying salaries, there's permanent establishment, there's all those things which we can't really escape from because we live on this spaceship called Earth, right? As soon as we can become space travelers, we might be able to define something new. So this holistic, or sort of the causality there is between that, is extremely important. And what we're doing in the Cardano ecosystem is we're building RegTech tools for the regulators, that they actually understand the causality among the governance actions, among the decentralization layer, to those dApps and token projects on the top. So there's a higher likelihood that when they send in a no action letter to whatever government it is, that there is a chance that they actually get fairly treated and fastly treated, so they understand what can they do and what can't they do, because there is a connectivity to the base layer.
Yeah. I think policy work is, of course, important, but policy work is only as effective as the government you are lobbying. And let's face it, most of the governments out there are not effective governments. It's a very small handful, and here in Switzerland is probably one of the small handful. So I think, if you look at what happened in the U.S. recently, as an American, I actually find that to be pretty shocking. Talking about centralization, right? Essentially, two folks. One person said this 6 months ahead of an election, and suddenly the political fortunes of a small handful of people suddenly flip a switch on the access that 50 million retail holders of crypto and however many thousands of developers can do without kind of threat of prosecution, right? I think that's totally unacceptable, personally. And on this whole sort of governance theme, I think what crypto does is it proposes the concept of self-custody and digital property rights very quickly becomes actually a very political notion as well, right? Because what Bitcoin proposed is that you have the governance of this network, this system, this kind of body, right, is exacted and it's governed by the people who participate in it. And that's a really powerful and pretty crazy, radical, insane concept, really. And not only that, it also proposes a governance system where it's very easy to enter and exit quite simply by selling a token or buying a token, right? And that's also something that we've never seen or really even imagined before, because typically if you want to change the community you're part of, you've got to, it's very physical, you've got to pack up, move, housing, banking, passports, visas, all that type of thing. And so I think that this concept that economic self-sovereignty moves very quickly into broader forms of self-sovereignty also influences the way we think about how we operate the foundation. We don't think about the foundation as a company. We don't think about the foundation as really having a say. We could have an opinion, but we don't have ultimate influence over any project's front-end decentralization, for example. I would recommend that that's something you put on your roadmap, but that's not our decision. In the same way that with 20,000 meme coins a day, you're going to get some that a lot of people don't like, right? And people came to us and said, are you going to issue a statement about racist meme coins? And we said, no, we're not going to, because that is not the role of us as the foundation. And we see the foundation as being a little bit like the kind of startup mayor's office of a burgeoning city, right? And therefore, in my opinion, our role is to create an attractive environment for builders to come. And therefore, there's what that means is you'll have a strategic, like many cities around the world, right? Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Hong Kong, Singapore, probably top of my list right now, even Zug here, right? Very thoughtful and strategic, said this is a sector that we'd like to attract. We're not going to do your work for you because you need to come and build a business that is, you need to take risk yourself and you need to build a business which is self-sustaining, right? Not all entrepreneurs are created equal. Let's not confuse credible neutrality when it comes to infrastructure with credible neutrality when it comes to the quality of an entrepreneur and the quality of their idea. So to me, our role, and ultimately this is compatible and ultimately supportive of decentralization over time, to see it as we try to create an attractive environment for people to come and build. And we don't pretend that we are the best in class with any specific technological knowledge, right? We do kind of have the elephant brain of the ecosystem. That much is true. There is a treasury, clearly, and I think that that is something that can be very strategic for all projects, right? Because oftentimes when there's a counterparty, let's call it custodians, and persuading custodians to support the ecosystem, if you try to have multiple projects go have that conversation, good luck. This is the go-to-market challenge that, for example, Cosmos has, right? Sovereign chains, every conversation is complicated because it's one counterparty and 5 different chains across the table, and it's just very complicated to do BD in a consortium type of setting. So that's, to me, how I my mental model for the foundation. And I think over time, if you do a good job with that, then the decentralization will come. If you have a supportive environment that people actually want to come figuratively move to your city and use your block space, like plow your land, then over time, that organically is going to happen on its own.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for letting me pick your brain. The 30 minutes flew by very fast. I think we have time for maybe one, maybe two short questions from the audience, and I would like to give you the chance to direct your questions at our four panelists.
I have a question. Do you see the concentration of AWS, Azure, and other cloud providers as a risk for you?
If there is a risk of
for whom?
AWS and other cloud providers for decentralization.
For whom? Oh, generally? I do, actually, and that's why we've looked specifically, for our own chain at least, in terms of quantifying network health, looked specifically at ASN diversification as well. What a lot of folks didn't really know is that Hetzner, in November of 2022, overnight said no more Solana validators in any of our data centers, and that was 15 to 20% of the network, right? And actually, no one outside of the validators themselves, and some folks who were very involved in network operations, really noticed. And because we've taken that very seriously, so I think that's something around the world is, or with various chains as well, ASN diversity, geographic diversity as well, is absolutely important.
I guess here I can say I don't, because like intercomputer protocols runs all on sovereign hardware and independent data centers, no piece on Amazon whatsoever. It's all like, if I remember well, it's like 160 different data centers and no providers all over the world. Even if one of them goes off, I don't have nightmares about that. There's like others that can go on. Proposals can be made replacing that node with another data center. So to me, I don't care at all about Amazon or Hetzner.
I do think it's a risk, and we can't monitor it because we have over 3,000 block-producing stake pool operators. But we have some really good reporting tools, which we also make available for governments when they look at critical infrastructure, ESA, SOC 1 and SOC 2 kind of evaluations of distributed networks. We are aware of it, as I mentioned very early in this conversation. And I think you have to look at the incentives. So when you have some blockchains who basically is for free to run in a Google Cloud environment, you will see that if the incentives are not very high from the blockchain or the foundation, well, you start getting a concentration, and then you might get to a situation like Solana had, but there's multiple chains who had that kind of situation. So for us, it's not a risk at the moment, but it's something we are aware of and we look at constantly.
I think that these types of events are, they seem like tail events, but they actually aren't. If you remember what happened to Parler in January of 2020, after the January, or 2021, after the January 6th riots, essentially, the Web2 companies collectively banded together and offboarded Parler from the internet, right? When we, in March of 2023, when SVB had its issues, then the government enacted Operation Choke Point in its final stages and deplatformed much of this industry and others from banking. So I think that these seemingly crazy events that seem like tail risks, I don't think they are tail risks in this industry. And I think that one of the hallmarks of, in my mind, people who are part of crypto, they do think about tail risk, are typically attracted to contrarian positions, and do not find comfort in sort of mid-curve type of outcomes. And so as a result, I think absolutely AWS, to me, that's really just 3 steps away for AWS to have a very hostile approach to crypto.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. No? Okay, if it's a quick one, is it a quick one?
Well, not sure. Actually, my question is a bit beyond blockchain and more about interaction with the traditional financial system. There are a few major crypto foundations, but I believe any of these interaction with traditional finance, at least run your treasury operations, interact with the rest of the financial world. And my question is, do you see it as a challenge for you? Is it difficult to find a bank partner or a custody where you can run your treasury operations?
Maybe very quick answer.
Yeah, I can do a very quick one on that. First part, yes, it is always difficult to maintain a quality tier 1 banking partner, also to run salaries, and I think all of us is struggling with that again and again. And secondly, for custody, no, we have no problems with that.
Yeah, and we are in a very based in a very pro-crypto jurisdiction, so we are lucky to benefit from Switzerland and the canton of Zug to do our business and run operations as well.
Again, indeed.
Awesome.
A very big round of applause for this fantastic panel. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise today.